So we will be doing the third and fourth briefings before the next break, just to prepare you. So this group worked on Enteric methane innovation tools for lower emissions and sustainable stock act of 2024. There'll be a quiz, so to see if you can remember the name of the bill afterwards. And so if Andrew can come forward, we will begin.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Tseng, and today I'll be presenting on the Enteric Methane Innovation Tools for Lower Emissions and Sustainable Stock Act of 2024. So, to start off, I want to discuss on why methane is an issue and why we need to lower its emissions. Methane is a greenhouse gas which warms the Earth's atmosphere, contributing to climate change. Methane is also 86 times more potent in warming the atmosphere than CO2 in a 20-year time span, and its emissions contribute to 30% of atmospheric global warming. Due to its shorter lifespan compared to CO2, reducing methane now can lead to a greater change for our climate. So where does methane come from? The main source of anthropogenic methane comes from the agricultural industry. Here, accounting for 40% of anthropogenic methane emissions. Out of this 40%, 80% comes from cattle methane emissions. So how do cows produce this methane? Cows have a specialized digestive system here that allows them to break down their food through a process called enteric fermentation, where microbes called methanogens decompose food in a process called methanogenesis. And keep this term in mind, methanogenesis, as we'll circle back to it later. To continue, 95% of methane a cow produces is then released through burping out of the mouth. So in order to reduce methane produced by cattle, the Emit Less Act was introduced into Senate. This is a bipartisan legislation focused on implementing solutions to achieve reduction of methane from cattle. The intent of this bill is meant to be incorporated into a future farm bill, a reoccurring omnibus bill that gets renewed every 4 to 5 years. To achieve the objectives of the Emit Less Act, our program framework designed by our team will be divided into 3 parts. The principal goal of our program, however, would be to target the main process on how cows produce methane, which is methanogenesis, which I previously touched on. We want to target methanogenesis because it is the source of 95% of the methane emissions coming from cattle. So our program will be divided into 3 components with 3 goals. The first component is focused on research and development for methanogenesis reducing strategies and technologies. The second component is focused on managing the lab-to-farm implementation of methanogenesis reducing strategies developed from the first component. And the third component will focus on providing incentives to farmers who implement these methanogenesis reducing strategies on their farms. So to start with our program components, component 1 of our program is focused on research that reduces the methanogenic process in cattle. To accomplish this, a division of enteric methane research will be established under the USDA. This division will oversee all research initiatives related to enteric methane reduction during methanogenesis, as well as conducting a baseline measurement of methane. The Division of Enteric Methane Research will be established under the USDA's Agricultural Research Services. This way, the division can coordinate their research with already existing regional laboratories operated by the Agricultural Research Services. Component 2 of our program will be to establish the Institute of Enteric Methane Program Management. This institute functions distinctly from the research division because it will be responsible for deploying the research findings from the research division to the actual on-farm implementation. It will also create and administer training and educational programs and to farmers who adopt the methanogenesis reducing practices on their farms, and overall will manage the lab-to-farm implementation process. Because this institute will be new, Component 3 of our program will focus on leveraging existing USDA programs like the Environmental Quality and Incentive Programs and the Conservation Stewardship Program to use their established resources and networks to, one, provide financial incentives for farmers adopting the methane-reducing practices, and two, to streamline implementation and extend our impact across the broader agricultural community. The total budget for our program would be $90 million over a two-year period, which our team decided since it's not stipulated in our bill. For staffing, key staffing in the division include a division director who will lead this division and a chief scientist who will lead the technical research side. For the institute, key staff includes the institute director who will lead the overall lab-to-farm implementation and the regional training and outreach staff who will provide the training and education to farmers on site. So how will we measure the success of our program? We'll focus on key performance indicators across the three component areas of our program. So first, in research and development, we'll measure KPIs like the number of research projects initiated and peer review publications published. In lab-to-farm implementation, we'll track highlights like the percentage of farmers trained implementing the methanogenesis reducing strategies. And in payment programs, KPIs will include things like number of contracts obligated under our incentive program, as well as farmer satisfaction. The timeline for our program starts in Q1, focusing on securing funding, hiring the core staff, setting up our research laboratories, and initiating the research and development projects. In Q2, we want to increase the staffing, launch the baseline data collection, and initiate applications for on-farm financial incentives, which farmers can apply to. In Q3, we want to continue to increase staffing, but also start the methane data monitoring, advance the pilot on-farm trainings, and publish initial reports on our findings. Finally, in Q4, we'll assess and refine our strategies, complete our pilot trainings, and compile our annual report to the USDA. And for future reporting, we'll submit biannual reports to Congress to justify continued funding. We'll also publish annual reports to the public to increase transparency and public awareness of our program's impact. For long-term goals of our program, we want to reach full staffing and seek partnerships with institutions for collaborations. And our final goal will be to achieve nationwide implementation for research and development, as well as on-farm support of methanogenesis reducing strategies. So to conclude, the Emit Less Act aims to reduce enteric methane emissions from cattle. Our program will tackle the process in which cattle produces the methane and reduce that process through researching reduction strategies and then implement these strategies. Finally, our program offers a scalable nationwide framework that can be implemented across diverse farming operations, and it lays the groundwork for the potential widespread adoption of methanogenesis reducing strategies. So I'd like to thank our advisor, Professor Rochelle McCandy, for her guidance, and I'd also like to thank my managers, Gabriel and Pamela, as well as the rest of my team for their hard work and dedication this semester. Thank you.
Questions? There's one.
Thank you, Andrew, for the very beautiful presentation. I was wondering, because I think you mentioned that the $90 million budget is is a number that the team came up with.
Yeah.
Would you have you thought of maybe revising it, or do you think that it is going to be revised under like current political developments? I mean, I get it that it must be a lot of money because it's a nationwide program, but have you thought about this?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think it's really helpful that our bill is like a bipartisan legislation, so it depends on like administration changes, but I think overall, because it's a bipartisan legislation, the budget, I think that it'll be okay. Yeah.
Other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much.